Number 10. Anya Corazon. Anya is also from Earth 616. She had the potential to become a version of Spider-Man as recognized by a member of the Spider Society. In order to save her life, this member, Miguel, transferred some of his power to her. This gave her a cool tattoo which unlocked her potential, granting her spider-like powers. She shares many powers with Peter Parker, but instead can generate her own organic webbing and does not have spider sense. Her reflexes, though, are still very sharp, and she also has the unique ability of having a very flexible skeleton. She's not only a gymnast and acrobat, but Anya also has a physiology that allows her to compact and extend her skeleton when needed, which also makes her more durable than most. Number 9. Spider-Man UK. Spider-Man UK of Earth 833 is pretty powerful just when you think about how connected he is to the story of the Spider-Verse. Billy Braddock of Earth 833 seems to have both the abilities of Captain Britain and Spider-Man, as he is an alternate version of both 616 heroes. He was also the first Spider Totem to really notice that something was amiss in the multiverse and was responsible for investigating further into that, traveling around to different alternate worlds. His homeworld was destroyed during the incursions that happened previous to the creation of Doom's Battle World, so instead he stayed on Loom World originally after the events of Spider-Verse, and became the leader of the multiversal team known as the Web Warriors. Number 8. Superior Spider-Man. Otto Octavius the Spider-Man was powerful because he was more fearless and less concerned with a moral code than his predecessor. Otto was willing to rely on tech more when it came to his role as Spider-Man, which was both an asset and accounted for some of his failures. Superior Spider-Man was not afraid to take out criminals for good, but in the end realized it was his personality and his ruthlessness as well as a lack of moral compass that often prevented him from being a better Spider-Man than Peter Parker. Eventually he stepped down from the mantle and relinquished Peter's body, which he had stolen, because of this revelation. Number 7. Silk. Cindy Moon was bitten by the same spider as Peter Parker, but on her ankle instead of on her hand. The spider bit her after it had bitten Peter, which also granted her spider-like abilities. Some of their powers differed, however. Cindy found herself able to create organic webbing, and her spider sense was more sensitive and had greater reach and range than Peter's. She ended up growing up mostly inside a bunker after a man appeared to train her but noticed she was being tracked by the villain known as Morlun. The bunker would hide her from Morlun, blocking his ability to see or track her, and had enough food and information to allow her to live within it for years, which Cindy did, living in it for over a decade. She could leave at any time, but chose not to due to the fact that the result of doing so could be catastrophic. Eventually, however, Peter freed her, knowing Morlun had already been defeated. Cindy and Peter shared a magnetic attraction to one another that was never fully explained, but could be because they were both bitten by the same spider. Could have been why they were so weirdly attracted. She might not be as physically strong as Spider-Man, but Silk Spider's sense is seen as being more advanced. Number 6. Peter Parker. How can I have a most powerful Spider-Man list and not include Peter Parker, right? Not only is Spider-Man often underestimated when it comes to his strength, but over time he's also become more and more known for his brilliance in the comics. He's one of the strongest and smartest heroes around in Marvel. Aside from all of that though, Peter Parker was also our first Spider-Man, and without him we wouldn't have the world we know as the Spider-Verse today. He's powerful because his character's popularity and relatability when he was originally created started a movement which paved the way for all the Spider folks who came after. Number 5. Scarlet Spider. Ben Reilly is one of Peter Parker's clones and is believed to be a more perfect version of Parker himself. He is basically a perfect clone of Peter Parker. Of course, Ben still has his own issues, but he is sometimes even the preferred Spider-Man when fans have the choice between Spider-Man of Earth 616 and his clone Scarlet Spider. Like Peter, Ben is also a skilled inventor and has come up with many modifications to his equipment, like his stingers. He also managed to sneak into the Baxter building, which he believed had the finest security systems in the world, and yet he was able to get around them and disable those that were in his way. Pretty impressive. He's not just powerful in terms of his powers, but he's powerful in terms of his brain as well. Number 4. Spider Carnage. In the 2019 Spider-Verse limited series, Spider Carnage takes on Spider-Man and her family, including the brilliant Peter Parker and the heart of the team, Uncle Ben. Miles Morales teams up with her to take him on, but this ruthless version of Peter Parker from an alternate universe was tough to beat. This version of Peter believed heartily in the destruction of the multiverse and intended to go after tons of alternates, destroying destroying them, while bonded with the Carnage symbiote. In the end, it took Spider-Man reaching out to all the other alternate Spider-Mans from across the multiverse to even stand a chance at winning in a battle with him. Spider-Man also might not be young, but she is tough and she's very capable, so this should give you an indication of just how tough and terrifying Spider-Carnage really is. Number 3. Miles Morales. One of the most powerful abilities Miles has that separates him from Peter Parker of Earth 616 is his Venom Blasts. A few alternate Spideys have a variation of this power, but Miles is one of the most well known for it. His Venom Blast is so powerful that we see what happens when he manages to duplicate it while fighting what appears to be a copy of himself in Miles Morales Spider-Man 18, revealing just how powerful this power can be and just how durable Miles himself is. Beyond his abilities, Miles is also powerful in what he represents. Spider-Man became such a popular character when he was first introduced because he was so relatable. As time has gone on and young Peter Parker has grown up and become an adult, his story has moved more and more away from that of the relatable high school geek just trying to fit in and help out his elderly aunt. Miles, however, still kinda has that relatable vibe. As wild as his story gets, he's a character that very much feels relatable and grounded in reality. He embodies all of the characteristics that we loved about Peter Parker originally without being a carbon copy of him. He is Spider-Man. Number 2. Captain Universe. There are actually 2 different versions of Cosmic Spider-Man or Captain Universe, but the one we're going to talk about for the purpose of this list is the version from Earth 13, the one that I feel like more people are familiar with. This alternate Spidey decided to keep the powers of the Enigma Force instead of relinquishing them. He ended up joining the Spider Army and using his powers to protect spider totems from the multiverse. He did unfortunately have to stay within his own universe to do so, otherwise he would lose the Enigma Force powers, which allowed him to manipulate matter and sense things and see and discover truths on a cosmic level. While he was powerful enough to be trusted with protecting other spider totems, he ended up meeting his end at the hands of the powerful Soulless, the Inheritors' leader, who managed to feed off the life energy of Cosmic Spider-Man's powers, killing him. Number 1. Cosmic Mayday. What could be more powerful than a version of Peter Parker who kept the Enigma Force? How about the daughter of an alternate Peter who relinquished it? For that alternate, we are going to have to go to the last panel of one very specific comic, the 1989 What If series issue 31. In this reality, Peter Parker from Earth 9110 kept the Enigma Force longer than his 616 counterpart, but still eventually relinquished it. However, it was later revealed during his time as Cosmic Spider-Man that he and Mary Jane conceived a child. At the end of the comic, their daughter is born. We can assume that she would likely be named May, as many of their alternate daughters have been, and that she might even have Spider-Man's powers. But she also appears to have some of the Enigma Force as well, potentially making her one of the most powerful spider children and people to have ever lived. Sadly, we don't come back to her to learn more. That's a what if story for another time apparently. She's just a baby.
Number 10. Miles Morales Symbiote. That was fast. After being infected with an offshoot of the Grendel symbiote by Carnage, the symbiote took control of Miles and transformed him into a 6-armed Carnage doppelganger. And for those unaware, I'm referring to the character doppelganger. Strong enough to contend with Venom, the Miles Morales symbiote proved exceptionally dangerous, enough that Venom was willing to kill Miles to stop it, but was stopped by Eddie. It briefly also took hold of Jonah Jameson, but Miles chose to rebond with it so that he could use it to fight Dark Carnage, and briefly overcame its will. Sadly, this didn't last, and Miles succumbed to the symbiote, attacking Eddie. Fortunately, Eddie was able to kill the symbiote when he channeled electricity through Captain America's shield, and finally freed Miles from its grasp.
Up next, number 9, Venomized Gwenpool. Gwendolyn Poole from Earth TRN-646, much like many of the other characters on this list, is essentially Gwenpool of her own Earth, which is Earth TRN-565, but hosting the Venom symbiote. In case you're out of the loop about the very awesome Gwenpool, her home reality is one in which she understands that the Marvel Universe is fiction, yet manages to manifest herself within Earth 616's universe. The Venomized version of her, though, first appeared in Edge of Venomverse issue 2 in September of 2017, and she decides to turn on her boss and lawyer, Mr. Melville, after she reveals to him Daredevil's true secret identity. Her Venom symbiote influences her to kill him, justifying the act as the only way to keep Daredevil's secret a secret from the public. So she does, and it kinda pays off because she does work with Daredevil to fight the Hand. But unfortunately for her, she was eventually killed off in the same issue as she appeared in, by a Poison, who was impersonating an alternate version of Daredevil, who then ate her whole. rough way to go.
Number 8. Toxin. Yep, the 1000th spawn, first appearing in Venom vs. Carnage number 2 in 2004. So when Carnage was giving birth to Toxin, Carnage initially wanted to destroy the spawn, because once Toxin was finally born, Carnage was too weak by the process to even kill it. Venom, on the other hand, wanted to raise the spawn and train it, and even named it Toxin after itself. What a nice name. New York City cop Pat Mulligan then became the host of the symbiote. So Patrick actually left his wife and kid because this thing was too unpredictable and powerful. Good call, Pat. So Venom and Carnage saw this police officer infused with Toxin and knew that it would most likely end up being a hero. So with his abilities to shapeshift, unlimited webbing, healing factor, tracking specialties, this guy can even hide himself in the blood of his host. Ew! They both obviously tried to kill it and of course failed. Toxin stands out from the rest of the symbiotes because, like I said earlier, he's spawn number 1000, he's special. But why? So every 1000 generations, the symbiote is born with what's called genetic memory breakdown. And since he was abandoned at a young age, he never really acted like a true symbiote. During a heated battle with Venom and Carnage, Toxin is aided by the web slinger himself, Spider-Man, who's somewhere on my chest. After the unlikely duo defeats Venom and Carnage, Spider-Man gives them the cool dad talk and encourages them to just be better. I like Toxin a lot actually, he reminds me of like a bratty child. He broke Patrick's laptop after he referred to Toxin as a monster in an online blog, but he tried to make up for it by stealing a bag of laptops. What a sweetheart. What a gentle man. Toxin is the second hero in the symbiote family right after Hybrid.
In at number 7, Riot. Riot is one of the symbiotes who makes up one of our previous numbers, Hybrid, but he's arguably scarier on his own. The character who first appeared in Lethal Protector came to be after the Life Foundation removed multiple offspring seeds from Venom in hopes to use them as super soldiers. Riot, along with his siblings, were bonded to various mercenaries that worked for the Foundation, with his being Trevor Cole. Trevor was particularly volatile, described by his peers to be unhinged, thus making Riot a much more violent and vicious symbiote compared to his siblings, which is already saying a lot. Riot would later bond with the new host in hunting down Carnage, with a group formed by the government after being retrieved from his hybrid state, which would eventually lead him and his siblings into encountering Deadpool. Riot is also making his cinematic debut in this year's Venom movie, bonding with Riz Ahmed's Dr. Carlton Drake, who runs the Life Foundation. The character's origins will obviously be slightly altered, being with a different host, but since the Venom movie is removed from the symbiote's Spider-Man alien costume storyline origin, that should be no surprise. In at 6, Hybrid. Riot and his siblings broke out of their confinement at the Vault after Venom's psychic shriek. They then merged into a super hybrid symbiote known aptly as Hybrid, who would then briefly bond with a character named Scott Washington, who was a guard at the Vault. Scott realized through bonding with Hybrid that Hybrid wasn't actually that much of a threat after all. Instead, the experiments they had undergone were causing it a lot of pain, and the symbiotes were actually the ones preventing Scott, who had a lot of anger issues, from being violent. Unfortunately for Hybrid and its desires to be a good-intentioned vigilante, Eddie Brock was on a mission to hunt down the symbiotes, and ended up killing Washington in the process. Hybrid would then be found by the US Army, be separated, and then be put to use as part of the Mercury team in order to fight Carnage. Needless to say, being the combination of Riot and the other symbiotes was significantly stronger than just a singular symbiote. Side note, the sibling symbiotes, Phage, Agony, and Lasher, didn't make this list because of how similar they were to Scream and Riot in terms of ability and power. Although Lasher was trained to bond with a dog named War Dog, which appeared in Carnage vs. Deadpool, and it's like really awesome. Symbiote dog. Speaking of Carnage though.
Number 5. Anti-Venom 2. Anti-Venom, aka Flash Thompson as Anti-Venom 2, came to be after Flash Thompson confronted Eddie Brock at Alchemax's astrobiology lab, wanting to return to being Agent Venom. Venom did not wish to choose between the two hosts, and much like any fool in a love triangle, attempted to have his cake and eat it too. Or rather, eat both cakes, in that it tried to bond with Flash and Eddie at the same time. Spider-Man attempted to kill the symbiote and overturned one of the vats of anti-venom serum, dousing Flash in it, causing the symbiote biomass bonded to him to be altered into a replica of the original anti-venom symbiote. This version of the symbiote seems to have all the same powers of the original anti-venom, including superhuman strength, durability, and stamina. Sadly, Anti-Venom 2's appearance would only be brief, as Norman Osborn used the Carnage symbiote to become Red Goblin, and when Anti-Venom confronted him, he was able to kill Flash and the symbiote, ending his tenure as Anti-Venom.
Up next, number 4, Mania. Mania, also known as Maniac in later years, is one of the most vicious symbiotes to date. A clone of Venom, specifically cloned from Venom's tongue, this symbiote was initially created as a means of exterminating all life on Earth, but it refused to bond with any of the hosts that it was exposed to. Instead of bonding fully, Mania would bond and then brutally maul and murder each one of these potential hosts for fun. At one point, it comes into contact with a prospective host who is a prison inmate, who manages to reject the symbiote. So How does Mania react? By bonding with an elderly mental patient and then taunting the inmate about how he was raped in prison, and then proceeded to reenact the assault before murdering him. All in all, pretty f***ed up character, yeah? Mania would go on to mass murder a bunch of individuals before a new host by the name of Lee Price took over the symbiote and then reshaped it, calling themselves Maniac instead. Up next, number 3, the venomized Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange on his own in any Earth is pretty much a threat to be wary of, but in the Venomverse, he's the character who leads the resistance, and the one who summons the Venoms from all of the other alternate realities to fight against the poisons. So his story in the Venomverse starts when he stumbled upon a Venom symbiote, who was on the run from the poisons. Once they bonded, he became privy to the threat that the poisons pose to the multiverse, so Strange concocts a plan to build the resistance and take down the poison hive. He's eventually kidnapped by the poisons, and during the resistance attempt to save him, they end up destroying the hive, and he dies, but not before he manages to teleport all of the resistant members back to their own home realities. What a guy.
Number 2, the Maker Hybrid. Hybrid itself has been around since 1996, but Hybrid during the Absolute Carnage arc attached itself to the Maker, aka Reed Richards, who honestly proves to be kind of a dick. Like, he's just a thinly veiled jerk to Dylan and Normie, prompting Dylan to, as he put it, do something stupid. So they obtain weapons, and upon firing, free the hybrid symbiotes, who immediately come together and absorb the Maker, creating a brand new hybrid. The Maker hybrid promptly pursues the boys, seeking to take the Codex out of Dylan. Despite the combined efforts of Hawkeye, Dylan, and Sleeper, the Maker hybrid manages to escape and flees into the sewer.
And finally, number 1, my personal favorite, Scream. Yep, making its first appearance in Venom Lethal Protector number 4, this scary looking symbiote is one of the 5 Life Foundation symbiotes. Donna Diego, a Life Foundation volunteer, bonded with the symbiote and became Scream. Making a fun little appearance in the Venom movie, Donna Diego, a security guard from the Life Foundation, bonded with the symbiote, and she helped a new host deal with their symbiotic merging. I imagine it's not too comfortable to have an alien race inside of your head and swirling around your body. Probably pretty uncomfortable. I thought growing was painful. Ooh. The coolest thing about her is that she uses her hair to fight. Like I said earlier, she is one of the Life Foundation symbiotes, and she's pretty unique to watch in action. My hair isn't long enough yet. She's actually pretty similar to Venom. The wall crawling, webs, the camouflage, the whole package. And if you saw the Venom movie, you got a chance to see Donna Diego, played by Michelle Lee, in action. So in the comics, she went pretty much 20 years without actually having a proper name. She didn't don the name Scream until the toy line from Toy Biz dropped the action figure in the 90s, titled Scream. It's a pretty cool looking action figure too, yellow with the red splats. I feel like it for sure scared some kids.
Coming in at number 10, we have the homemade Miles Morales suit. I love when you go back through the comics and you find the first suit that every super put on. You have the janky Iron Man suit that was too bulky to fly, you have the old school Blade looking amazing in the 70s attire, and the famous purple pantsed Hulk. With Miles, we have a classic look of the sweater thrown over a black t-shirt with the black pants on. This suit is just amazing because it marks the dawn of a hero, the moment when you accept the fact that you're going to take on all the evil in the world and protect the people who can't protect themselves. And it shows how young, unexperienced, and unprepared Miles is to go out and fight crime. Those first few years as a super are some of the best comics you can read. It's fun watching the hero make little mistakes while trying to stop a bank robbery. It's a refreshing break from trying to stop Thanos from collecting the Infinity Gems. I gotta say, that's probably a lot easier. Coming in at number 9, we have Miles wearing Spider-Man. This happens a lot in comics. A superhero dies and then a less experienced hero with similar abilities puts on the suit to take up the mantle, so the world feels safe and no one knows that they passed away. We saw it happen in Batman when everyone thought that he was dead and Nightwing decided he would become the new Bat. And then the same thing would happen with Miles, but in a much less official way. In the Ultimate Spider-Man universe, there was the tragic death of Peter Parker. The world was now left without Spider-Man. Miles thought that New York should not be without the friendly neighborhood hero. Now, unlike Nightwing becoming Batman, Miles didn't have access to the official tools that Spider-Man had been using, so he ended up wearing a Spider-Man suit that a friend purchased for him from a Halloween store. You can imagine this wasn't the same quality suit that Peter Parker had been repping, but hey, a hero gotta do what a hero gotta do. Coming in at number 8, we have the Spider-Verse Spider-Man costume. Let's roll from one tacky, poorly fitting Spider-Man knockoff suit right into to another. In the movie Into the Spider-Verse, we have Miles wearing a Spider-Man costume that he cuts eye holes into, and it's way too baggy for him. This is a hilarious look, and it really showcases the hero just starting out and having no idea what he's doing. Not only that, but Miles got this suit from Stan Lee himself. Do you guys remember that scene in the movie? Just a warning for anyone who hasn't seen Into the Spider-Verse. I don't know what you've been doing with your life, but there will be some spoilers coming up. In this scene, Spider-Man has just died. Miles goes into a store to get a Spider-Man costume. He then gets the suit from Stan Lee, and Stan Lee says, "I'm going to miss him." And this was right after Stan Lee had just passed away. I'm not confirming that me and my bro cried in the theater, but we might have cried in the theater. Coming in at number 7, we have the Ultimatum suit. Dimension traveling Spider-Man, that's just something that comes up in the comics again and again. And when we see Ultimatum Miles Morales, it doesn't even look like any Spider-Man I know. And that's partly why I put it on this list. It's good to have a little variation, baby. The Ultimatum suit looks like a collage between different heroes put together. And I'm gonna say it's not my favorite suit of all time, but it does have some pretty cool elements. On the back, it looks like it has Captain America's shield. The chest seems to have the circle plate glowing thing that Thor has going on. And then when you step back and look at the whole suit put together, there's some major giant man vibes. Coming in at number 6, we have the Cosmic Spider suit. Even though some comic fans don't see Miles as a legit Spider-Man, he has made some amazing accomplishments and deserves to be respected. I want you guys to know that I think Miles is a first-rate Spider-Man, so don't destroy me in the comments, please. One of the most insane things that Miles has done is become Captain Universe. This took place in Spider-Geddon number 5, and it gave Miles a whole new look. The white, blue, and black cosmic look was extremely cool, and of course he had a slew of new powers at his fingertips. He had the ability to blast energy rays out of his hands, he could fly, he had hypnosis, he had telekinesis, and that is just a few of the powers that were passed down to him. When people become Captain Universe, they are sort of a Silver Surfer-esque being with the amount of cool things they can do. Coming in at number 5, we have the black and gold Iron Spider suit. This suit is a masterpiece. The black and gold go together so well. You can't not look like a boss while wearing something like that. Also, it has the extendable metal arms that every other Iron Spider suit has. Now, I'm well aware that this suit is only worn by Miles for a little bit. I know that it's mostly worn by Aaron Davis, who is the Prowler and also Miles' uncle. Man, I think you have to have family issues if you want to become a hero. It's like the trauma makes you better at saving people or something. Coming in at number 4, we have Spider Tech. As time goes on, so do the cool possibilities for suits. This suit was featured on the cover of Miles Morales 13. At first glance, it might just seem like a standard suit, but when you get a closer look, you will see that there's much more going on. There's a digital logo displayed on the front of the suit that has an amazing effect. It kind of looks like this static thing going on, and the same effect is layered over the eyes. Also, the glowing red on the gloves and shoes just makes the whole thing pop. I love how this whole thing has a very near future look. I don't know how practical it would be to have glowing parts on your suit while you're fighting crime, but hey, I still dig it. Coming in at number 3, we have Miles Cross Carnage. Whenever a symbiote gets onto someone, it makes them 10 times cooler, and when this creepy liquid alien managed to hook its claws into Miles, we got a variant look that is insanely cool. The black and red cross with the flowing being of the symbiote really makes the suit look way cooler than a lot of the other versions of Carnage. Maybe not cooler than the Green Goblin, but that's a whole other beast. My favorite thing about this look is the spiral on the face. The sort of hypnotic spin that is entrenched in the face really gives off an image of insanity, and when Carnage is pulling the strings, you know things are going to get a little crazy. Coming in at number 2, we have Weird World Miles Morales. Yes, this suit has to be one of the coolest in the whole Marvel universe, and I'm not even just talking about Spider-Man suits. This is one of the coolest of any superhero. I mean, let's just take a look for a moment. First of all, he has a cape, and I know Edna Mode preaches no capes because they're not practical and they're possibly very dangerous, but my god, is this cool. It's all black with red webbing running through it, and then it comes with a hood. He looks like Batman crossed with Assassin's Creed. Then we top this off with the fact that this version of Spider-Man is whipping around daggers at everyone. Are you serious? A Spider-Man who uses throwing knives has to be one of the most lethal things on the planet. Coming in at number 1 is Into the Spider-Verse with the Jordans. Oh yeah, Into the Spider-Verse was a smash hit and introduced Miles Morales to a mainstream audience. I know many comic fans have been singing his praise from the mountaintops for years, but I feel like this movie was so incredible that mom and dad who don't read comics now know who this new web slinger is. And I have to say that this movie brings in one of the best suits that we have ever seen Miles in. Now the suit doesn't give him any special powers unless you count looks that could kill. But in this movie we have Miles wearing a black and red suit with the red logo sprayed on the front of the suit. Having the spray painted logo gives Miles such a unique look and showcases his personality coming through the costume. On top of this, we have him rocking a dope hoodie, jeans, and the Jordans. You gotta give it to Miles for having a pair of Jordans that match his suit perfectly. I do wonder if it makes it harder for his feet to stick to surfaces, but especially after the Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance, this has gotta be one of the best superhero suits ever. Alright nerds, that is all we have for you here today, and before I let you go, I'm going to give you guys my picks for my favorite Spider-Man video games. My first pick has to be Spider-Man 2 for the PS2. If you're too young for this, you won't remember how amazing this game was. Literally, it blew everyone's mind because it was the first time you could be Spider-Man in an open world sandbox game and go anywhere you wanted. I even remember the commercials. It was like, you can go from the rooftop to the blacktop. Nowadays, this is something that's very standard in games, but back then it blew everyone's mind.
Hey, you're actually keeping up. Nice.
Coming in next is Ultimate Spider-Man. This game had a wide array of characters with some crossovers from other comic books. It's a game that felt extremely comic booky with all the villains and expanded universe things that were taking place, which really made you feel like you were playing inside a comic book. And my last pick is, of course, Marvel Spider-Man for PS4. This game is hands down the best Spider-Man game ever made. The open world is amazing, there is a ton of fan service in the game, and the game was made by Insomniac, who has stood the test of time as one of the best developers in the industry.
Number 10. JJ and Henry Abrams' Spider-Man. This story is dark in many different ways. When JJ and his son Henry Abrams announced that they were writing a Spider-Man comic together, fans were intrigued to see what they'd do. JJ Abrams is known for being a controversial, albeit successful film director and writer. He's directed Mission Impossible 3 and the Star Trek film, and written Cloverfield and Star Wars films, The Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker. It's been an interesting road for him. Alas, the comic he wrote with his son was not dark in quite the way that we maybe had hoped. The story pits a young Ben Parker, Peter's son, against the slow to speak but eerie Cadaverous. He faces this threat with his dad, who abandoned him when he was younger after his mother Mary Jane had died. Or at least we think she died. Oh yeah, and Peter also has a hook for a hand? I don't know. Tony Stark also appears in this dark and bizarre story as a more eccentric and older version of himself. It's a weird time. Number 9. Life Theft. This 3-part story took place in the 90s, starting in Amazing Spider-Man issue number 386. It featured a Vulture who had once again become young after draining the life force out of Spider-Man, using a device known as the Juvenator. This cures Vulture of his cancer and makes him young and strong once again. Fully rejuvenated, the Vulture sets out to take revenge on all those who wronged him, planning to kill them, leaving Peter Parker as a withered old man. Eventually, however, this resolved itself as the Juvenator's effects are only temporary. But this is also the story where Peter discovers that the people he thought were his parents were actually life decoy models that were a part of the Chameleon's plot, which also shatters him to the core. Also, just the idea of Vulture as a life stealer is pretty dark to me. I kind of wish he had those powers even without the Juvenator. I think it would just make him a cooler villain as well. Number 8. Secrets. This Spider-Man story from the 1980s appeared in the Spider-Man and the Power of Pack comic, and it was both dark and touching all at once. In it, Peter Parker saves a young boy from being physically abused by his sitter, Judy, and reveals that as a young child, Peter Parker himself was also a victim of abuse. His older friend Skip showed him sexy pictures in a magazine and tried to get young Peter to reenact the images with him. Peter told adults that he trusted about the abuse, and only after rescuing young Tony from a similar situation as an adult, realized that he was never to blame for what happened to him years ago. This is an issue with a powerful message, but it's also pretty dark. Number 7. Maximum Clonage. Maximum Clonage was of course a smaller part of a greater story known as the Clone Saga. In this chapter, spread across a few different comics' individual issues, Peter was led to believe that he was actually the clone and Ben Reilly was the original Peter Parker. This drove him somewhat mad and ended up causing him to at one point strike Mary Jane, who was also pregnant at the time. This story also involves the almost death of Kane, who sacrifices himself to protect Peter, and Maximum Clonage pretty much starts off in Spider-Man Maximum Clonage Alpha with a nice recap of just all the terrible things that have happened to Peter previous to this story. Clone Saga was a rough time for Peter actually in general. Number 6. The Other. The Other is one of the most depressing stories in Spider-Man history. Spider-Man finds himself plagued on all sides by enemies while also learning at the same time that he is rapidly dying. Peter is determined to find a cure for his mystery illness and reaches out to his friends and colleagues in the superhero community, known for their brilliant minds. The unfortunate thing is, no one seems to have an answer, and as each day passes, Peter moves closer and closer to death. Doctor Strange, after looking Peter over, even confesses that a magical cure does not exist for what ails him. It seems no matter where Peter turns, no one has an answer, and the villain Morlun lurks in the shadows, taunting Spider-Man, enjoying his suffering. At one point, Morlun also viciously attacks Spider-Man, beating him bloody and even eating one of his eyes. Yikes. Only the police managed to save Spider-Man from being fully devoured by the villain during that fight. Number 5. Back in Black. After Kingpin finds out Spider-Man's secret identity, he targets those that Peter Parker loves the most, and successfully has Aunt May shot. Aunt May clings to life in the ICU, and Peter is so broken up over this, he sets out to find out who is behind the attack. He uncovers Kingpin's involvement. Kingpin of course is currently in prison, but still managed to order the hit from the comfort of his cell, still holding great power and influence even while locked up. Spider-Man dons his black costume and pays Kingpin a visit, but when he fights him, he fights as Peter Parker, removing his shirt and his mask. He almost beats Wilson Fisk to death, but he holds back. However, Aunt May's life, Peter tells Fisk, is the only thing that is keeping Peter from killing Kingpin. He tells Fisk that he better pray that Aunt May makes it through, because if she doesn't, Peter will be back to finish the job. Number 4. Spider-Geddon. Anytime we have a story that involves the fate of all spider totems, it's usually pretty dark. Spider-Geddon was the sequel story to Spider-Verse. In this story, the Inheritors manage to return thanks to superior Spider-Man's cloning tech. Some of the Spider-Man armies show up to put a stop to their return, but too late. Instantly in issue number 1, we lose Spider-Man Noir and Spider-Man UK, just like that. Even if you aren't a fan of the Inheritors, you can't deny that energy vampires are pretty dark. Fortunately, this story gets a happy ending, and most of the spider totems we lose come back in some capacity, including Ben Reilly, who acknowledges just how many deaths he's had previous to this one, literally as he dies. But still, the amount that is at stake, as well as the fast-paced deaths that launch us into action, makes Spider-Geddon a fairly dark one, filled with action and loss. Number 3. Revelations. This story was pretty dark because it was the one where it was revealed that Mary Jane and Peter Parker's baby was kidnapped by none other than Norman Osborn for some insidious plot that, well, it's still never really been revealed, even over 20 years later. We were led to believe the baby was spirited away by a woman working for Osborn, Allison Mongrain, and was perhaps still alive years later. However, Norman would go on to claim that the baby was dead. Allison Mongrain slipped something into Mary Jane's food at a restaurant, causing her to go into early labor, and then disguised as a nurse stole the suspected stillborn infant. Mary Jane was told her child was dead, but it was later implied that the baby survived. This whole story is just all kinds of messed up. Also, poor Mary Jane. She's been through so much stuff. Number 2. Reign. This story involves an old senile Spider-Man who lost Mary Jane to cancer years earlier, which he discovers his own radioactivity caused. He has retired from being Spider-Man and now owns a flower shop, but hallucinations and incessant injustices cause him to attempt to return to a life of heroics once more. However, Spider-Man is now an old, kinda deranged man, and as such this story mostly involves him getting his butt kicked in between hallucinations of Mary Jane's ghost and her rotting corpse. Number 1. Sins Past. One of the darkest Spider-Man stories to date that continues to haunt my nightmares is Sins Past. This story starts in Amazing Spider-Man issue 509. In it we learn that Gwen Stacy had an affair with Norman Osborn, which resulted in a pregnancy. Gwen secretly gave birth to twins, and their existence was forever kept secret from Peter Parker. Osborn raised the two children to hate Spider-Man, making them believe that Spider-Man was their father and had killed their mother, when in reality Osborn was their father. And he also kinda killed their mother. This whole story was an extra level of dark and twisted that makes it both unforgettable and at the time something you kinda wish you could forget.
Starting us off in at number 10, Ant Venom. It's the giant-sized Ant Venom. This version of Scott Lang doesn't get a whole lot of page time in the Venomverse story arc, but is still quite entertaining all the same. So, for context, the Venomverse was a limited series that occurred in 2017, which starred Venom, and took notes from the successful Spider-Verse story event, written by Cullen Bunn and drawn by Eben Colello, who had previously worked together on Deadpool and the Mercs for Money. It followed the story of a war between the Clintars and a new alien race that was introduced called the Poisons, who are their natural predators. Described as the biggest Venom story of all time, it started with Venom being transported to an alternate dimension to participate in this war, summoned by that Earth's venomized Doctor Strange. Strange had summoned many other versions of Venom and his hosts to this Earth, including our pal Scott Lang. Essentially, Scott was a venomized version of Ant-Man, who has all the same powers as the regular Scott Lang has, plus the added bonus of all the fun, horrifying things that the Venom symbiote is capable of. The character is prominently featured in the kidnapping of a poison version of Gwenpool in Venomverse issue 4, but unfortunately the character was eventually killed off in the Venomverse issue 5, and goes in a pretty tragic way. He was killed by his teammates as a means of preventing a poison from assimilating him, so I guess at least his teammates care about him? And at number 9, Hybrid. Hybrid ain't a pretty amalgamation, that's for sure. Hybrid is a combination of 4 of Venom's offspring: Agony, Phage, Lasher, and Riot. Having previously appeared in the Venom Lethal Protector series back in 1993, these symbiotes went through a bit of a rough time after they were defeated by Eddie Brock, and found themselves in the Vault, a prison for supervillains, being experimented on in a lab facility. After they had broken out of confinement, they fused together into a single symbiote and bonded with a host named Scott Washington, who was a guard at the Vault. They would later be defused, but would end up fusing once more during the Deadpool vs. Carnage series, defeating Carnage and then passing on from Deadpool to a dog that had been trained to bond with Lasher. Not the worst host one can get, that's for sure. Up next, number 8, Scream. In 1993, a Venom story arc came out called Lethal Protector. It followed the story of the Sinister Life Foundation and its leader, a scientist named Carlton Drake, who discovered a way to create symbiote soldiers by extracting something called seeds from the Clintar alien race, and growing them into fully formed symbiotes. Essentially, it was their offspring. The Life Foundation aimed to use these symbiotes as guardians. Their whole shtick was that they were preparing for something called MAD, which is mutually assured destruction. And they had a whole roster of wealthy clients who were paying for the Life Foundation to ensure that they would have comfortable lives if the world went to shit. Once Drake had kidnapped Eddie Brock and managed to forcibly extract these 5 seeds from Venom, he was able to bond the offspring with members of the Foundation's security force, one of which was named Donna Diego, who became the Yellow and Red Scream. She eventually was defeated by Eddie Brock and killed, but her siblings would outlive her and cause Brock a whole lot of trouble down the line.
Number 7, Dark Carnage. This guy may not be a totally new symbiote, but his powers and forms are, and they just keep getting stronger and stronger as the story goes on. So much so that the combined efforts of Captain America, Wolverine, and the Thing are useless against him. This version of Cletus Cassidy was briefly connected to the Dark God Null, but that connection was broken when he ripped out Scorna's spine to consume the Codex, the trace elements of the Carnage symbiote left over from when she hosted it. Cletus decides to take part in helping to free Null and begins to consume the codices of other symbiote hosts. This leads to him gradually growing in power until finally, after consuming Venom Hulk, he achieves his 5th form, resembling a devil. Dark Carnage proves more than a match for every opponent he comes up against. That is until
Number 6, Riot. So if you saw the Venom movie, then you're familiar with his next symbiote, or symbiote if you only watched the trailer. There aren't too many comic books about Riot, but being the villain of the 2018 live-action film, I can't not include this. Played by Riz Ahmed, Riot can actually contract blades and claws with his powers. He kicks ass, being one of the 5 Life Foundation symbiotes discovered from a comet. So once obtained, the symbiote attached itself to astronaut John Jameson, and then it eventually found its way to San Francisco when it found Carlton Drake, the CEO of the Life Foundation. The master plan? Well, to bring more symbiotes to Earth and eventually take over the planet. Papa No would be so proud. Who's that? He's just the dark god of all Clintars. I'll get into him later on. That is until Venom comes along and saves the day. Spoiler alert. I like Riot. I think he was pretty decent in the movie. Some have even said they prefer this adaptation of Riot over the comic book version. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Fight down below.
Up next, number 5, Venomized Logan. This Logan has the same origin of the one from Earth 807128. the one that killed the X-Men at the X-Mansion while under the control of Red Skull. This version though, years later, had been lured into a trap by Bruce Banner Jr., who he had raised as a son, but also lied to about his parentage. Along with Ashley Barton and Warren Worthington III, Banner Jr. tried to kill Logan, and use his remains to create an army of clones by utilizing the venomized T-Rex that had survived an encounter with Black Bolt earlier. There's lots of details on this one that we're skimming over, so yeah, sorry, it's a big story. Anywho, the symbiote decided to jump ship from the dinosaur and bonded with Logan, who was then unable to kill Bruce Banner Jr. because he still saw him as a son, although the symbiote was like, do it. Logan would then be summoned by Doctor Strange and fought alongside our last number, although he was potentially killed in the explosion of the poisoned ship in Venomverse issue 5. And at number 4, Scorn. Scorn is the hybrid prothesis created from Carnage that combines both technology and the symbiote. Now in Carnage Volume 1 issue 4, Carnage is taken back to Earth after breaking out of the Raft prison by an American industrialist by the name of Michael Hall, who then locks up Cletus Cassidy and uses the symbiote to create new suits of armor. Carnage breaks out of its containment, bonds with a psychiatrist named Tanis Knives, but then things get a little weird. Carnage leaves his own offspring within Knives' prosthetic arm. Knives is horrified by this, cuts her arm off, but then later would rebond with it, becoming Scorn. Scorn is essentially a techno-hybrid, a machine symbiote who is able to fuse itself with different kinds of technology and mechanical weapons, which most definitely came in handy, no pun intended.
Number 3. Sleeper. Sleeper is the 7th spawn of Venom, and was actually born from an unusual pregnancy. It attached itself to the Scorpion, but Venom and Eddie were worried that allowing it to bond so young might result in it becoming a monster like, well, nearly all the other symbiotes. So Venom and Eddie chose to leave it in the care of Alchemax. Sleeper has proven an ally of Venom and his family, having protected Eddie's son Dylan and Normie Osborn from the Phage symbiote while it was serving Carnage. Sleeper attempted to bond with Dylan, but Dylan's symbiote powers repelled him. Dylan managed to control Sleeper and shaped it into a wolf to attack Hybrid.
And at 2, Venompool. Deadpool has been bonded to the Venom symbiote prior to the Venomverse event. Back in the day, he had actually tried on the symbiote before Spider-Man had, something that was added into Deadpool's lore long after the symbiote had first appeared and bonded with Spidey in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 252. Anywho, according to Venomverse editor Devin Lewis, I quote, "Deadpool is one of our main Venomized protagonists. He's got so much heart and he's always a source of unpredictability, insanity, and goofiness." Which, I mean, sounds about right as far as Deadpool is concerned in like any reality. But he is right. Venompool is a massive part of the Venomverse arc, and because of his persistent insanity, he's one of the reasons why the Resistance is successful in overcoming the poisons. During the war, he noticed that when poisons took over Spider-Man, Spidey couldn't bring himself to kill the Venomized Spinneret, whose alter ego was Mary Jane Watson. This gave him an idea. He surrendered himself to the poisons, believing that a host's original persona still had some agency while being under their control. And he was right. His insanity gave him extra resilience to the poisons. So even after he was assimilated, his mind still remained his own, and he was able to suppress the poison that tried to take him over. He would then aid the Resistance in infiltrating the poison's hive, but was left for dead before Rocket's bomb went off. Finally, in at number 1, Carnage. Carnage may not be able to compete with a god in terms of power, but it would be criminal to not give the symbiote the top spot on our list. He's by far the most terrifying, nefarious, and sinister of the symbiotes, and has the aesthetic to match. Carnage has one of the most interesting stories of the symbiotes in the Marvel Universe too. Eddie Brock had landed himself in prison at one point, and had the unfortunate experience of having an individual named Cletus Cassidy as his cellmate. Cassidy was a psychotic murderer, serving 11 life sentences at the time. Now at this point, it was believed that the Venom symbiote was dead, but turns out he was just incapacitated. It eventually rebonded with Eddie once more, allowing him to break out of prison. But without Eddie knowing, Venom had done something. It left behind one of its spawn in the prison, which ended up bonding with Cassidy, making him the 999th naturally born symbiote. Thus, Carnage was born, and he was much bigger and much badder than Venom. Cassidy, being such a ruthless and contemptuous killer, made Carnage even more so, and over a period of several months he would go on a killing spree, leaving the words "Carnage rules" in blood at the scenes of his crimes. Carnage has been a long-lasting character in the Venom mythos, an antagonist to the character always trying to kill his father since first appearing in Amazing Spider-Man issue 345 back in 1991.
At number 10, we have Spider-Man's psychic connection to spiders. That's right, kind of like Ant-Man, but a weaker version. It comes out when Spider-Man's senses are enhanced to the point where he can start to sense spiders that are around him. So it means that he can empathize with them, but he can also encourage them to help him out. So not as hardcore as all the ants, taking over and helping out, but they can, assist a little bit. Kinda neat, had no idea. At number 9, we have a genius level intellect. He's nerdy and smart, and we definitely know that. We've seen that over the years a ton of times. But in Amazing Spider-Man number 588, it was stated that Peter Parker's IQ is higher than 250. Albert Einstein's is 160, so like, whoa, this guy is smart. Proof of this is all throughout the Spider-Man universe. He develops power-enhancing formulas, antidotes, he even hacks into Tony Stark's computer system to discover the Parker particle. So he's really, really smart. Up next, number 8, we have accelerated healing. He's no Wolverine or Deadpool. It's not like a really quick suddenly he's healing, but he's been beaten by the Hulk like to a bloody pulp and survived it. He's gotten acid in the face and come back for it. He's even been burned so much that he's basically unrecognizable, has a night's sleep, and looks the same again. At number 7, we have camouflage/invisibility. Another Spider-Man, Miles this time, not Peter, similarly was bitten by a radioactive spider, but has a slightly different power set than Peter on account of his spider being infused with this enhanced version of the Oz formula. One of the drastically different ones is his ability to organically camouflage himself. And we're talking everything, his body, his clothing, he just naturally blends into his surroundings at a moment's notice, essentially becoming invisible. This is such a great ability in a fight. I mean, you hit them, you become invisible, you like walk over to the side, boom, hit them again. It's great. At number 6, we have grows extra limbs. This is one of my favorites for sure, just even visually, it's just so fitting. Now, it's not like he can grow them whenever he wants. In a 1971 The Six Arms Saga, which was written by the late Stan Lee himself, Peter decided he didn't want to be a Spider-Man anymore. He didn't want the Spider-Man abilities, so he, using that wonderful intellect of his, creates a formula that's untested to get rid of his powers. After he drinks it, he falls asleep, has all these horrible dreams, and when he wakes up, he now has 6 arms. Whoops. I guess not like the biggest genius ever, but hey, luckily a doctor helps him reverse it. So there you go. For number 5, we have equilibrium. We see this all the time throughout all Spider-Man, but I don't think we really register it. He has this excellent equilibrium. We can see him jumping around all the time, sticking to things, and what we don't realize is that his body is naturally adjusting at all times, keeping him upright on even the most oddly angled surfaces and after lots of those much-loved Spidey acrobatics. Oh my god, speaking of acrobatics in Spider-Man, have you guys played the new Spider-Man game? It's so good! The web slinging they finally have down, the combat system, it's so beautiful. It's just like, oh, it's like you're playing an action movie. You should definitely check that out. At number 4, we have bulletproof. Okay, it's not that he actually physically becomes bulletproof, but he became the Iron Spider, and that's that suit that Tony Stark gave him or built for him. So not only was it bulletproof, but it also boasted other things like these extra metal arms and stingers. Thank you, Mr. Stark. You're a lovely man. At number 3, we have one I really didn't see coming. Cosmic power. That's right. In Spectacular Spider-Man number 158, Spidey goes cosmic. He's bestowed with unipower to defeat these unusual and extra difficult bad guys. He gets godlike strength, he can shoot energy beams from his hand that are strong enough to destroy a planet. What? Watch out, Shazam. Watch out, Captain Marvel. There's a new kid in town. Number 2 is one we have heard of many superheroes having, but haven't really thought about Spider-Man having it, and it is super speed. Yes, he has great agility and spidey senses, so he looks fast, but he's been known to outrace speeding cars or travel the entire length of Manhattan in 10 minutes. 10 minutes! That's like going over 100 miles per hour or something like that. He has been so fast sometimes that he is like a blur. He'll like come into a room, take out a bunch of people, no one even sees him. So I don't know, maybe the Flash and him should like exchange numbers, hang out sometime. At number 1, we have a weird superpower with spider stingers. It happens in the other storyline where he gets retractable razor sharp stingers in his arms. They're hard like bone and they're coated in this venom that can cause temporary paralysis or even death. So it gets a little darker, and I would love to see this in a Spider-Man movie coming up. Fingers crossed?
Number 10, Carol Danvers. While this one never became a tried and true relationship, there was a kind of strange but interesting time that these two went on a date. Now, how did this happen? Well, Spider-Man agreed to do a favor for Carol, but in exchange, blurted out that he wanted a date with her. The date itself is super awkward and terrible, but as such proves to make for a pretty hilarious read. You can check it out in Miss Marvel issue 47. Both Carol and Peter struggle to find anything to talk about over a dinner at a nice restaurant. The dinner is then interrupted by evil Hammer agents who are dealt with before the two finish off the night eating junk food together on a rooftop. It actually ends on a nice note, with the two realizing the awkwardness was likely coming from the fact that they were both too concerned with impressing one another. Other than a few cute and infrequent moments of flirting between the two, this relationship has never really been revisited, but it's safe to say that Carol and Peter will always respect and care for one another, even if they aren't currently getting romantic together. Number 9. Betty Brant. Betty Brant was the secretary of J. Jonah Jameson. She and Peter met through their jobs at the Daily Bugle, and after an incident with Betty where Peter, disguised as Spider-Man, saved her life, he realized that he had feelings for her. They dated for some time, but their relationship ended when Betty suspected that Peter might have feelings for one of his fellow classmates. It turned out that this was all a misunderstanding, but regardless, Betty ended up moving on, dating and eventually marrying Peter's friend and coworker, Ned Leeds, who of course also worked at the Bugle. Despite no longer being together, Betty has always considered Peter one of her best and most reliable friends. Number 8. Carly Cooper. After MJ and Peter's marriage was over and done with, Peter slowly ended up moving on. Carly Cooper was one of the first women he ended up with after MJ and he ended things. Carly was a forensic specialist who ended up going on a few dates with Peter, and eventually, after much humming and hawing, the two ended up as a couple for a time. In fact, it was Mary Jane herself who helped the two get together, making Carly see that what was holding Peter back from committing to their relationship really was himself, and helping Peter to see the same. The relationship didn't last, unfortunately, as Peter's life as a vigilante, as Spider-Man, ended up wedging the two of them apart, and they broke up. Carly has been hot and cold with Peter since then, sometimes his friend and confidant, and sometimes wanting nothing to do with him. Number 7. Silver Sable. These two never really got a chance to explore a relationship, but Silver Sable is definitely a love interest that has become popular with fans. Popular enough that she appeared in the PS4 Spider-Man game DLC content Silver Lining, where sparks between the two characters flew. In the comics, Silver Sable is a well-trained mercenary and owner of the company Silver Sable International. Silver Sablanova is from the small fictional Eastern European country of Simkaria, and is known for being an ally of Spider-Man. She is one tough cookie you do not want to mess with. Silver Sable only ever flirted with Spider-Man, and then revealed her feelings for him only somewhat when they thought the world was ending. Number 6. Silk. These two instantly had a very magnetic and physical attraction to one another. Spider-Man learned that Cindy Moon was another spider person / spider totem who had been holed up in a bunker for years in order to protect her from the villain Morlun. He freed Cindy from the bunker. I mean, she could have left at any time really, but she didn't because she knew the risk, by giving her the information that Morlun had been defeated. Both immediately had a strong and unexplainable attraction to one another, which could in theory have been caused by the fact that it was revealed that they were both bitten by the same radioactive spider, which granted them their abilities. They had a very physically intimate relationship during their time together due to their off-of-the-charts pheromone attraction to one another. And Silk still remains an ally of Peter's. Number 5. Kitty Pryde. In the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, a young Kitty and Peter had a budding romance that many fans enjoyed. The two got together after ending relationships with their current partners, Kitty breaking up with Iceman and Peter breaking up with Mary Jane. Most of their time together was spent taking down criminals, and as such, Kitty was forced to wear a mask costume to prevent anyone from recognizing her and piecing together Spider-Man's secret identity. These two were super cute together, as both of them are kind of awkward yet charming characters. Like with most of Peter's relationships, his need to protect his secret identity ended up being the force to drive them apart, as this also meant that the two had to keep their romantic relationship secret, lest people somehow use that to figure out that Kitty and Peter were the pair of masked vigilantes. Though in the end, it was Peter getting back with Mary Jane that really put an end to their relationship. Although Kitty never really stopped having feelings for Peter, even after he was dead. Number 4. Spider-Gwen. While Spider-Gwen is obviously not a love interest for Peter Parker, whom this list has mostly been about, she is the main love interest for another famous and popular Spider-Man, Miles Morales. And Spider-Gwen and Miles are so cute together, I just had to include them. Their love for one another is so strong that it crosses universes, with Spider-Gwen being from Earth 65, whereas Miles was originally from Earth 1610. These two met and developed feelings for one another, but decided to stay friends. For now, anyways. Although the two did witness a potential future where they ended up married with superpowered kids on Earth 8. Number 3. Black Cat. Felicia Hardy is one of the fan favorites when it comes to Spider-Man's most famous love interests. Black Cat almost instantly fell for Spider-Man upon him chasing her down. She is sometimes a criminal, sometimes a hero, and sometimes a neutral party in the Marvel-verse. The two have dated and flirted on and off for years, but it's usually Felicia's obsession with Peter's Spider-Man persona, her jealousy, and her sometimes criminal ways that gets between the two. Though the two have also broken up over other things, like when Spider-Man was kind of worried about Black Cat's safety as a non-powered vigilante. This concern actually inspired Felicia to get powers, which she obtained from the shady villain Wilson Fisk, aka Kingpin. Needless to say, she was forced to keep the origins of powers themselves a secret from Peter, while her powers themselves also made her and Spider-Man's relationship more difficult, as it turned out she ended up with bad luck powers, which infected her enemies and those closest to her, which includes Peter Parker. Just her luck. Number 2, Gwen Stacy. Gwen will always be one of the big love interests for Peter because she was one of his first loves, and the one he lost the most dramatically. The loss of Uncle Ben and Gwen Stacy have haunted Peter for years, and often still do haunt him today. Peter Parker's story as Spider-Man is nothing without that loss and that feeling of responsibility. It is what has weighed him down while also inspiring him to be a hero, and it has shaped him into the person he is today. Originally, Gwen and Peter both bonded over their love of science, and she fell for him. The death of her father caused a rift in their relationship as Gwen blamed Spider-Man, not knowing that Peter himself was Spider-Man, while also resenting Peter for being so absent around her time of mourning, because, he was Spider-Man, so he was off doing Spider-Man stuff. Peter had promised her father right before he died to protect Gwen, and yet, while trying to save her, she died. The fateful panel where he manages to secure her falling body with his webbing is often pointed to when it comes to why Spider-Man blames himself. Whether or not she was dead before Spider-Man managed to grab her, that fateful snap of her neck will always haunt him and readers. Gwen represents for Peter what could have been. She will always make him wonder, inspire him to be better, and he will always love her. Number 1, Mary Jane. Well, Mary Jane may have initially lost out with Peter to Gwen when Peter and MJ were in that school year love triangle. Mary Jane was the character left standing at the very end, and as such, ended up with Peter. But really, what keeps these two so close is more than that. More than just that convenience. Not only is Mary Jane stunning, but she is kind, empathetic, and really seems to understand Peter in a way no one else does. Sure, she can't always be with him because understanding someone doesn't mean you can always stand them, but the two are usually guaranteed to always get back together. Mary Jane will always be there for Peter and proud to know him, and he'll always admire her boldness and her commitment to do what's right. Both will always love one another, and in a way, be one another's heroes.
Number 10, Venom. Now, of course, I'm going to start with Eddie Brock. I mean, this dude made his first appearance in The Amazing Spider-Man 252. Venom was initially attached to Peter Parker, obviously, hence everything, aka Spider-Man. So before that, it even bonded with Deadpool briefly. God, I would pay to see that on the big screen. Still would be R-rated. Has to be at that point. It didn't last very long though, so eventually it moved on and found none other than Eddie Brock. Cue Topher Grace cringe. After being part of the Kree-Skrull War, he's actually an anti-hero, despite how he may look. And the teeth. The teeth give away a lot. I was excited to see him in Spider-Man 3, as most of you probably were, because Spider-Man 2 is still one of the best superhero movies, hands down. Fight me. I don't know. So once I heard about the villains in Spider-Man 3, I was pumped. Why? I mean, so once Spider-Man released the symbiote and it bonded to him, he became stronger. He got unlimited webbing, regeneration. He realized that this suit is literally alive. So after Eddie Brock got fired from the Daily Globe, after Spider-Man called him out, oops, Eddie Brock, who also had cancer, got pretty pissed. And as you saw in Spider-Man 3, he eventually bonded with the symbiote at the Bell Tower. Then it was all downhill from there. We are Venom, two become one. So naturally they both wanted to go and try to go after Spider-Man. Imagine having a fully sentient being merge with you. I think I'd be on board. Hey, touch this and you'll be Spider-Man. Okay, done. No problem. No questions asked. The symbiote is able to cling onto other beings and bond with other superpowers. Its weaknesses are heat and loud vibrations. So like I said, it can bond with other superpowers or other superheroes, like the Green Goblin, which I'll save for later.
Number 9. Probably the oldest of the new symbiotes on this list. I made a mistake trying to pronounce that, is a peculiar symbiote, which feeds on the host's brains rather than adrenaline. So much so that in Realm of Kings Imperial Guard number 5, when it was separated from its host Razzle Longknife, it was launched at the corrupted Charles Xavier of the Cancerverse, who was basically a giant brain monster, and it began to eat him. This one's bizarre.
And at number 8, Kroba. Kroba is likely the least known symbiote on our list, but just one look at it screams frightening. So Kroba is an entity that comes from the pits of darkness, naturally. It bonded with a scientist and drives him mad, causing him to go on a rampage of New York, which when you really think about it is unsurprisingly common in the Marvel universe it seems. It's also one of the only symbiote characters to appear in the comics that doesn't have some sort of familial connection to Venom, and isn't one of his offspring, first appearing in Venom's Seed of Darkness in 1997. But despite its appearance, it went down in a pretty lackluster way, being defeated by Eddie Brock thanks to the Flash on his camera. Speaking of, in at number 7, Riot. Riot has been getting a lot more attention these days, thanks to his upcoming cinematic debut in the Sony Venom film, starring Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock. Now Riot is one of Scream's siblings. It bonded with Trevor Cole, a particularly aggressive and unhinged mercenary working as part of the Life Foundation security team. Riot is known for being the largest symbiote of the 5, and often uses very aggressive and violent tactics in combat. He often created large bludgeoning weapons from his arms, along the lines of hammers or maces, and tended to be considered the strongest out of the group, although his exact strength level was never really elaborated on. After he and his siblings were defeated by Eddie Brock, they were all shipped off to the Vault, a prison for superhuman criminals that had a wing specifically for extraterrestrial threats. There he was experimented on, pretty cruelly, and then in the Planet of the Symbiotes story arc in 1995, Venom, in an attempt to subdue an invasion of symbiotes, let out a powerful telekinetic scream that caused them so much pain that they all committed suicide, actually a thing, which then affected Riot and his siblings. Moving on to our number 6, Laura Kinney. Laura Kinney's Venomized self is absolutely terrifying. First appearing in Edge of Venomverse issue 1 back in August of 2017, the character has an interesting story. From Earth TRN 645, the character's origin is similar to her Earth 616 counterparts. Raised as an assassin called X-23 in the facility that cloned her from Wolverine, she continuously attempted to escape imprisonment, and on her 5th try, she accidentally punctured a tank that contained a confined Venom symbiote. The symbiote bonded with her and boosted her powers, allowing her to finally break out of the facility for good. She fled to New York, made a derelict bank her home, which then caused locals to fear that the building was haunted. Eventually though, she encountered the Runaways, who were fleeing the gangster known as Zebra Daddy. Fun name. Rather than listening to Venom and eating the group of kids, she aided them, killing the gangster and his thugs, and sharing her home with the Runaways. Her symbiote has been known to further separate itself into other pieces to bond with others in order to protect them. In other words, the Runaways, who she has a fondness for. But the symbiote can always be recalled. Eventually though, agents from the facility had hunted her down, but before she could make a stand against them, she was summoned by the Venomized Doctor Strange. During the war, she would take up the alias of Wolverine, and managed to survive the battle and return back home to her reality. Also, another neat tidbit of information about her is that she would constantly be at odds with her Venom symbiote, not wanting to fight or kill unless she had to. And, well, that's kind of Venom's jam most of the time, isn't it?
Number 5, Anti-Venom. Also an anti-hero, this non-sentient symbiote made its first appearance in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 671. Anti-Venom was born at the Feast Center in New York City. So in the New Ways to Die storyline, Eddie Brock and the Venom symbiote have parted ways. And Eddie Brock has cancer. What a bummer. Martin Lee comes in and saves the day and bam, cures the big C. But in doing so, he infused trace amounts of the leftover Venom symbiote with his white blood cells. Oops! So while that was cooking up inside, Mac Gargan, the Scorpion, who was part of the Thunderbolts, and he was the current host of the Venom symbiote. So this anti-Venom comes along and fuses with him, and it's pretty sweet. Being one of the white blood cells, he actually has the ability to heal people. He can sense if you got something wrong going on inside, like like an ear infection or, I don't know, some more serious disease. He can create antibodies to attack whatever it is. How clutch is that? Flash Thompson actually wore the suit in the storyline too. Super neat. Check it out.
Number 4. Scorn. Scorn is the offspring of Carnage after the symbiote escaped from its containment cell and left its offspring within Tranus Neve's prosthesis. After Shriek took Neves hostage, Neves got near the new symbiote and became one with it, creating Scorn. Sadly, the fate of Scorn does not look good, as during the events of Web of Venom Carnage-Born number 1, the recently reborn Cletus Cassidy ripped out Tranus' spine, presumably killing her and absorbing her symbiote as he had so many others.
Up next in our number 3 spot, Grendel. Grendel compared to some of the other characters on this list, hasn't had a whole lot of panel time, but that doesn't make Grendel any less terrifying. So this creature is a dragon symbiote that was a servant of Null. More on Null later. Grendel would take on Eddie Brock's Venom and Miles Morales' Spider-Man in the 2018 Venom run, Volume 4. Grendel has the blood of multiple civilizations on his, I guess, teeth, not really hands. It ravaged societies during the earlier medieval period, including Norse soldiers, which caused Thor to trap it inside of a glacier in response. Flash forward to 1966. S.H.I.E.L.D. discovers Grendel and ran many an experiment on it, which ultimately led to a bunch of destruction by Grendel in Vietnam during the war. It would later be incapacitated and put to sleep until it was awakened by Null and unleashed on New York. See, there's a trend there with these symbiotes going after New York. To make matters worse, this symbiote dragon isn't affected by sonic waves or heat, and rather was defeated thanks to Thor's lightning and Spider-Man's Venom Blast, which caused it to destabilize and unravel into a giant amorphous mass. Man, I hate when I unravel into a giant amorphous mass. Not a good day. Moving on to number 2, Toxin. Toxin, being Carnage's offspring, has been long considered the strongest of the symbiotes. Now, Carnage was disgusted by his offspring and hated it, especially since he knew he would become stronger than he was. With Carnage being his father, this makes Venom his grandfather. Now, Carnage tried to kill Toxin, whereas Venom tried to protect it, the intention of raising it to become his partner, but was also a little bit concerned about Toxin since he was the 1000th symbiote of their line, and feared that he might go insane due to a genetic breakdown. Now, Toxin can also do some pretty cool stuff. He has inherited the abilities of his lineage, like sticking to walls and the ability to shift his identity. He can blend into his surroundings to become practically invisible and undetectable. He has unlimited webbing, and he can form solid weapons from his limbs. But in addition to that, he has a much more accelerated healing ability compared to his father, exceptional tracking abilities, and prefers to not take over the host's minds. Rather, listens to their opinions instead. He has a stronger resistance to heat and sonic-based attacks too compared to Carnage, and has a venomous bite. And at number 1, Venom vs. Carnage. If our part 1 of this list made anything clear, it's that the Clintar symbiotes grow stronger the further down the lineage they go, meaning Venom's offspring will inevitably be innately stronger than he is. This is why the Venom vs. Carnage tops our list this time around. Now, for starters, this Carnage comes from an Earth in which he had successfully killed Venom. When he was summoned to fight in the war against the Clintars and the Poisons, he didn't get along well with the Resistance at first, and actually fought against them. Eventually though, he gave up on his volatile ways, realizing that this war gave him the opportunity to battle what he called a bunch of messed up superheroes, eventually fighting alongside them. Unfortunately for this Carnage, he was eventually used in a ploy against the Poisons by the poison-turned-venom pool that we just talked about, in order to infiltrate the Hive spaceship, where he was essentially left for dead, although it is unconfirmed whether or not he survived when the Hive was destroyed in Venomverse issue 5. It seems pretty likely though.
Number 10, One Less Eye. That's right, kicking off the list at number 10, we have a Spider-Man moment that gives me goosebumps every time I see it. We start now with Spider-Man, The Other, Evolve or Die, where we see Spider-Man get his eye ripped out. Yeah, Morlun put Spider-Man through quite the battle, but ultimately it ended with his eye being a midnight snack. Spider-Man even compared being hit by Morlun to being hit by the Incredible Hulk, saying how he's never been hit so hard in his life. He has no idea it's about to get so much worse. And before we continue, if you guys haven't done so already, please make sure to go ahead and give us a like, because it helps us out a bunch here at the studio. It's this one. Thanks a lot. Okay, now back to Peter Parker's awful life. Number 9, Man Spider. We've all wished at some point or another that we could have Spider-Man's powers. I mean, the wall crawling alone I would take. So useful. But what if you got more than you bargained for power-wise? Well, in Spider-Man Disassembled, we see this in a pretty gross way. Peter starts to become an actual spider, starting with growing an extra set of peepers. Yeah, so that's disgusting. But wait, there's more. He ends up becoming an actual spider. Yeah, so after being injected with this goop from the Spider Queen, not only does he grow some extra eyes, but he also gives birth to another Peter Parker. Yeah, you heard me correctly. So out comes Peter, and he's the same Peter Parker as before, but a little stronger, with maybe a hint of PTSD sprinkled in there. But that's not particularly new to Peter. Bonus points to Peter also for attending a wedding with the 2 extra eyes and not being noticed. Gotta love Star Trek themed weddings. You get away with everything. Number 8, Venom. Making its debut in Amazing Spider-Man 299, next up on the list we have the introduction of Venom. Venom is a symbiote from the Clintar race, and after making its way to Earth, it eventually wound up in the hands of course, Spider-Man. So this dark symbiote started to make Spider-Man's life better. I mean, he got a cool haircut, started standing up for himself, and the suit made him stronger. It just felt better. But this didn't last too long because the symbiote found its ideal host shortly after Peter ripped it off. and that being Edward Brock. Eddie had visited Our Lady of Saints Church to beg God for forgiveness before ending his own life. And then this alien symbiote bonded with him mentally and physically. Like I said, at this time Peter was there trying to get rid of the symbiote because it was doing more bad than good in his life. Now because it had originally bonded with Spider-Man, he basically is another Spider-Man, kind of. He gets the same powers Spidey used and also some of the same memories. It's actually why Eddie Brock knows Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Fun little fact. This ended up creating one of Spider-Man's best villains, and we get to see Tom Hardy reprise the role of Venom in the not so near future. Number 7. Tony Stark's death. With rumors swirling around about the next Spider-Man movie being one within the multiverse, it's only fair to go back and look at some of the sad themes of Spider-Man Far From Home, with of course being the death of Tony Stark. So right off the bat, we see Peter struggling with the weight of the world, having everybody look at him as the new leading Avenger. With most of our other Avengers off-world, Spider-Man facing Mysterio couldn't have been more grueling. This poor kid even gets slammed by a train at one point. It's easy to say this is a time where Peter could for sure go without. Reconnecting with lost friends, dealing with much older classmates like bad boy Brad, who doesn't make the first year back in school easy for Peter at all. That plus Tony Stark's inventory just being handed off to him, that's a lot of responsibility. The kid's going through a lot of pressure and puberty too. I mean, probably. What a combo. And number 6, the affair. Gwen and Norman's affair, to be specific. This is an absolute nightmare of an issue, so of course we're throwing it in here. We go now to Sins Past, which was this 5-part story that revealed that Gwen Stacy had actually had an affair with Norman Osborn. And they had kids named Gabriel and Sarah. So he meets them in a pretty wild way. We're introduced to these 2 twin characters, these new mysterious characters, and one of them really resembles Gwen Stacy, like by a lot. So Spider-Man 509, this begins, and it starts with a letter from a dead Gwen Stacy. So Peter starts to analyze the situation and the letter, and eventually finds out the secret that even Mary Jane knew about. So 7 months before Gwen's death, she gave birth to these twins with Norman. But because of Norman's blood, they aged a lot faster. And this wasn't taken too well by comic book fans, as this was written out pretty fast. Still an awful time for Peter, I'd say. I mean, even Mary Jane knew about it the whole time. So many secrets, so little time. Number 5. Doc Swap. This is a body swapping story that might make you pretty uncomfortable. So we go now to the Amazing Spider-Man 700, where we find a dying Dr. Otto Octavius. So Octavius switches bodies with Spider-Man, so that Spider-Man would die in his body and then he would live on inside the body of a superhero and do some good. Not a bad plan. Now the best part of this is that Peter was still inside, a little bit. He was able to remain inside the body and could only communicate with the new webhead, Otto Octavius. It's like your subconscious just talking to you the whole time. It was pretty neat to see this version of Spider-Man as well, and after a few minutes with the new, younger, healthier body, donned himself the new name, the Superior Spider-Man. And number 4, parents are back? Yeah, this one's pretty neat. So right off the cover of this, we see the text, "The most cataclysmic events of Spider-Man's life begins in this issue." And that's probably enough to pull you into the issue. I mean, come on. So we find out that Peter's parents have returned from the dead. So in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 365, we meet them again. Peter comes home and Aunt May's like, hey, I'm here with our new guests. And Peter's like, oh, new guests, those are always fun. Are those my parents? Yes, Peter's parents had returned from the dead. Well, rather they had never died to begin with. Let me explain. So they went on to explain how they were alive and working for Red Skull in secret for years. Only it was later revealed that they were evil androids the whole time. So his robo-parents were actually collecting some intel about Peter to give back to Chameleon. Chameleon created these fake parents for Green Goblin. So many lies. Just a web of lies. Spider-Man web of lies. Now we get it. And number 3. Gwen Stacy's death. This one left average moviegoers stunned in theaters when The Amazing Spider-Man 2 hit the big screen. We finally see the death of Gwen Stacy, and it's beautiful. So of course this comes from the comics, specifically in issue 121 of The Amazing Spider-Man. The Green Goblin ends up dropping her off the Brooklyn Bridge, and although Peter has his trusty webs, sometimes the angle just doesn't quite work out, and Gwen's neck ended up snapping from the momentum. So this happened in the movie as well, and Eagle Eye fans could spot the clock tower in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 striking 12:10, which references issue 121. And the way the web shot out like a hand too, I mean, really? right in the heart. This scene's amazing. I mean, of course it's really sad, but the music, the way it's shot, really drives this part home. I mean, it's sad that this scene was one of the last ones we got from Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man run. Sure, the movies weren't as good as the new installments, but it would have been nice to see where this Spider-Man went after this dark moment. Would have been pretty dark. We'll never know. I mean, maybe multiverse stuff. We'll see. And number 2, identity not so secret. If you stuck around until the very end of Spider-Man Far From Home, you were treated to a pretty sweet teaser. So of course we see J.K. Simmons reprise his role of J. Jonah Jameson in what starts out as a pretty comical scene. Now of course we're happy to see him back in this Spider-Man universe, but he comes bearing bad news. He ends up showing leaked footage from the final battle with Mysterio, and in the footage we see him shout out Spider-Man by his secret identity, Peter Parker, and a nice little photo to go along with it too. Now this isn't the first time this has happened. Back in the comics before the Civil War storyline, Peter takes a page out of Tony's book and reveals his secret identity to the world. And after that, things go south quite fast, including a hired gun setting his aim on Aunt May. And finally, number 1, you guessed it, Uncle Ben's death. Of course we have to include this in the list and save it for last. We had to sit through this in theaters like numerous times. And that's for good reason. One of the biggest moments of Peter Parker's life was when his Uncle Ben died. Now, after letting a thug out of his sights, that thug ended up being the one to take his uncle's life. So not only did Peter of course feel saddened by this very close loss, especially not having parents to begin with, but he was responsible for letting this guy get away. He honestly let it happen, and then in Amazing Fantasy issue 15, we see it all unfold. So after a police officer asks Spider-Man why he let the crook get in an elevator and make a break for it, Spider-Man responds with, "Sorry pal, that's your job. I'm through being pushed around by anyone. From now on, I just look out for number 1. And that means me."
Number 10, Frogman. Less of a team up, more of a put up with. Spider-Man and Frogman can be seen teaming up in the pages of Marvel Team Up Volume 1, Issue 131. The two reluctantly join forces to take down the White Rabbit. Most of this team up involves Spider-Man trying to get Frogman to stay out of trouble and out of his way. Frogman is actually Eugene, the son of former villain Leapfrog. In fact, Eugene even reuses his dad's costume. He and Spider-Man do end up stopping White Rabbit with the help of his dad, who Eugene thought was working for her but who is secretly working undercover for the cops. Aw yeah. In the end, the reward money for her capture gets split up and everything ends up happily ever after for everybody. Eugene even gets to feel like a bona fide hero. Aww. Number 9, Red Sonja. Typical Peter has to cancel a date with MJ when the Daily Bugle needs staff to cover the pandemonium ensuing at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. But she sneakily tags along. And when Parker transforms into Spider-Man and gets stuck in a scuffle, a sword calls out to MJ and transforms her into Red Sonja. Akin to what happened to MJ, another soul has been possessed by the evil dark wizard Kulan Ga, and the two must team up to defeat him. Fortunately, they do, and Red Sonja stops possessing MJ, who faints into Spidey's arms. Gosh, do I love this MJ/Red Sonja mashup. I feel like I need to add Red Sonja to my cosplay list. Number 8, Venom. Spider-Man and one of top arch nemesis Venom have teamed up on more than one occasion throughout their history. But when I think of Venom and Spider-Man working side by side, I always think of Carnage. Another point that makes this team up so next level crazy. Carnage is a favorite among the symbiote fans, an offspring of the Venom symbiote that attaches itself to famed serial killer Cletus Cassidy. And you can find this showdown in the Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1 from issues 361 to 363, titled Carnage, Part 1, 2, and 3 respectively. The other thing I love about this team up is that it involves the Human Torch, and later the entire Fantastic Four team, who are called upon to help control Venom. Oh, and also when Spider-Man and the Human Torch go to recruit Eddie Brock to help them stop Carnage, Venom almost drowns Johnny Storm. It is for this reason, if you're going to read only one of the 3-part story, I recommend issue 362. Did I also mention that this team up also appears in the 1994 Spider-Man animated series, where the two reluctantly join forces to take down Carnage and Baron Mordo and stop Dormammu. Number 7, Manwolf and Frankenstein. For those of you who don't know who Manwolf is, he's like a werewolf from outer space. Yeah, that's right. He also just happens to be former astronaut John Jameson, son of Jonah Jameson. In Marvel Team Up Volume 1 Issue 37, we see Spider-Man coming together with Manwolf and Frankenstein to escape the clutches of an evil mad scientist, the Monster Maker, and stop his dastardly plot. This story is a fun one, especially if you are a classic monster movie fan like myself. Number 6, Wolverine. For this team up, there are a few different places we could take you, but I'd like to take you to a short comic series called Astonishing Spider-Man and Wolverine. In In this little 6-issue series, we get to see these two very different superheroes team up after just getting caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The two showed up to stop a bank robbery, only to have some time-traveling diamonds blast them millions of years back to the past. It's cute, entertaining, well drawn, and well colored. And if you don't believe me, I highly recommend checking it out for yourself. One of the things I love most about this team up is how well Wolverine and Spider-Man both clash and complement one another, and the interlacing of both darkly serious and light comedic writing. Number 5. Spider-Man and Spider-Man and Spider-Man. You know, I can't do a Spider-Man list without touching on the Spider-Verse, and more specifically, the film Into the Spider-Verse. One of my favorite storylines within this Spider-Man comic, Spider-Geddon, involves the exploration of alternate Spider-Mans. I love how much the storyline has come to embrace the idea of multiple spider people, or spider totems as they are often referred. All of these team-ups are linked by the idea that there are an unlimited number of universes, all connected by spider totems, different versions of Spider-Man, who are stationed in their own universe and are responsible for protecting it. Great threats to the multiverse, however, often require our alternates to take part in mass level team-ups in the comics. If you are more a fan of the Marvel Cinematic world, you will perhaps be more experienced with the very loose adaptation of the Spider-Verse storyline, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which was released in 2018, and experienced much critical and financial success. And if you aren't familiar with this film, like, you need to be. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. Number 4. Deadpool. On the opposite team-up side of Wolverine, we have Deadpool, who has a similar writing style to Spider-Man, though much more of his material could be considered more adult or crude. Not only have these two teamed up multiple times, and both have been Avengers, but they also have their own entire series together. And it's hilarious, as you may have already predicted. Spider-Man/Deadpool tells the story of Deadpool seeking out Spider-Man's help and confessing that Spider-Man has always been a role model. Cute. Eventually, Wade wins Spider-Man over despite the fact that Spider-Man does seem to often get annoyed by Deadpool's antics. The two take down all sorts of villains, including the first semi-big bad, Patient Zero, and complete all kinds of heroic acts together, including, but not limited to, saving Christmas. Number 3. Cast of SNL. I could explain this comic in full to you all, but I kind of feel like it would ruin it. This team-up comes to us from the Marvel Team-Up Series Volume 1, Issue 74. In that issue, you can see the cast of SNL, as hosted by none other than Stan Lee, team up with Spider-Man to fight some samurai. Yep, it is the epitome of everything that is super 70s in the comics, neatly wrapped up in one issue. The only thing that makes me sad about this team-up is that we didn't get more of it. Number 2. Mysterio. In the newest Spider-Man film Far From Home, we will be seeing Mysterio team up with Spider-Man. And if the trailers are to be believed, we will also see Mysterio be welcomed into the Avengers. This isn't the first time villain and hero have teamed up. We also see the two team up to defeat Doc Ock in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, Issue 686. Mysterio is probably one of the most iconic Spider-Man villains, an illusionist and trickster who often cannot be trusted. Okay, so there are two ways this team up could end in Far From Home. Number 1, Mysterio is retconned as a superhero in the film who maybe later turns villain, but you know, not yet. Or number 2, Mysterio is teaming up with Spider-Man simply to betray him. While Mysterio's motives are yet unclear, it is almost certainly guaranteed that Far From Home will at least allow us to see these two fight side by side at some point, granting us at least a small amount of team-up time for these two heroes. Number 1. Superman. Okay, so yes, while this DC and Marvel crossover is titled Superman vs. The Amazing Spider-Man, by the end of the comic the two are on the same page. And I had to include it because, like most of us, I do enjoy a good DC Marvel crossover every now and then. This one-off involves Lex Luthor and Doc Ock teaming up to pit the two heroes against each other, though in the end Spider-Man and Superman join forces to save their lady loves, Lois Lane and MJ, who have been kidnapped by the villains. And of course, they prevail, save the day, and you know, end up as buds.
In at number 10, Venom. While Venom may be the most iconic symbiote, and the first to make an appearance in the Marvel Universe, he's actually the weakest of the symbiotes. This is because he's the first of the bloodline. The offspring of a symbiote is much stronger than its parent, and since Venom was the first on Earth, all of the offspring symbiotes born from him are exponentially more powerful than he is. Each generation of symbiote is innately more powerful than its predecessor. That being said, it does come down to a matter of how you use it. Eddie Brock has always had a proficient amount of control over the Venom symbiote, and the other hosts that have worn Venom in the past, from Flash Thompson to Mac Gargan to Peter Parker himself, itself have all exhibited differences in the symbiote's functionality that are unique. Venom first hit the scene in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 252 back in 1984, first appearing as an alien costume that bonded with Peter Parker during Secret Wars. It wasn't until The Amazing Spider-Man issue 300, 4 years later, that Venom would take shape as Venom, and not just a parasitic symbiote. It bonded with Eddie Brock, who at the time wanted revenge against Peter Parker for ruining his journalism career.
Number 9. Carnage. What do you get when you mix a mentally unstable serial killer with the offspring of the Venom symbiote? Trouble. You get trouble. That's right, making his first appearance in The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 359, Carnage is a symbiote that is the offspring of Venom. Its host is none other than Cletus Cassidy. Cletus was sharing the same prison cell as Eddie Brock in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 344. So while Cletus was planning on stabbing Eddie Brock, just going red wedding on him, the Venom symbiote comes in to the rescue, saves Brock. So after Brock is reunited with the Venom symbiote and breaks out, a little piece of the symbiotic material attaches itself to Cletus, thus becoming Carnage. Carnage is terrifying. I'm actually really looking forward to seeing him put in some work in the Venom sequel, titled Venom, Let There Be Carnage. The director has said that just because the main villain is Carnage does not mean that it's R-rated. This has to be R-rated. We're looking forward to seeing him for that reason. That's like making Deadpool not R-rated. Just do it and do it right. Bam. Set to release summer 2021. Look forward to it. So, the malevolent Cletus Cassidy is being portrayed by Woody Harrelson, who is awesome, as you've seen him in anything. I also feel like Michael C. Hall would be good as Cletus. I don't know. Maybe it's the whole Dexter thing. He's got the vibe. Who knows? Are you looking forward to seeing Carnage on the big screen? Let us know in the comments.
Moving on to number 8, Rocket Raccoon. This venomized version of Rocket Raccoon made its debut in the Venomverse as well, and is one of writer Cullen Bunn's favorite venomized characters. In his home universe of Earth TRN 652, Rocket was a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy when he was bonded with Venom. But when the Poisons attempted to assimilate all of the Guardians, he was forced to kill his best pal Groot when he was turned. Since then, Rocket had become a bounty hunter during the duration of the war, taking on contracts like killing his world's Captain America, which is where the story begins for him when he's transported by Doctor Strange. He easily found himself being one of the Resistance's tech experts, which involved him creating bombs to use against the Poison threat, including the bomb that was eventually used to destroy the Hive's base.
Number 7. Hybrid. Okay, so once the Venom symbiote was taken by the Life Foundation, it was forced to create new spawns from its Clintar seeds. So these spawns were meant for these mercenaries to become super soldiers. Not a great plan. So as you can probably guess from the name itself, Hybrid is a mix of 4 of these different Life Foundation symbiotes combined. And those 4 are being Riot, Phage, Lasher, and Agony. All these symbiotes combined sounds cool, but I mean, what do? Well, Scream uses this living tendril hair to choke out enemies. Cool. Agony can spit acid, burning through pretty much everything. Lasher uses tentacles coming out of his back. And Phage forms blade-like weapons. So, what a combo. And in comes Scott Washington, a guard at the supervillain prison, The Vault. So he watched as these 4 symbiotes escaped their containment and they all temporarily bonded with him. Wow, okay, what a shift. So after these symbiotes fused with Scott, not only did he regain his ability to walk, nice, but he also discovered that they were not a threat and they were in fact in a lot of pain during all these experiments they were doing. Scott listened to his heart and set them free. Now, it's important to note that Scott Washington actually has a lot of anger inside of him. While normally the symbiotes would encourage the host to commit crimes and lash out, do it! Hybrid does the opposite. How lovely is that? Later on, while Washington is patrolling the streets, Eddie Brock actually paralyzed him with an electric shock, followed by a final bullet, killing Scott Washington in Venom number 4, issue 19. I'd watch this movie. I really hope we get to see Hybrid on the big screen soon, in a different way. I mean, all these voices swirling around Scott's head, that would be epic. You have to pick a good actor to do it though. So many voices, so little time.
Number 6. Legion. Eddie Brock, in an act of desperation after freeing the mind of Miles Morales, discovers that the Scythe device had harvested codices and chose to use them to create an alternate version of Venom known as Legion. After being tackled through the ground into the tunnel where Dylan Brock, Eddie's son, and Normie Osborn were hiding, Dark Carnage reveals his hand. No matter what Eddie does, Null will reawaken, and thus, Eddie impales Dark Carnage with a Necro Sword, killing Cletus Cassidy and absorbing Grendel and Venom. Dang, that was a fun read. Anyone who says Venom is overrated hasn't read this.
Moving on to our number 5 spot, Scream. Scream fits the bill as one of the scariest symbiotes for both being aesthetically chilling and straight up batshit crazy. For starters, Scream was another of the Venom offspring characters to first appear in Lethal Protector, but unlike her 4 other siblings, she wouldn't survive into the later Hybrid plotlines. Rather, she was killed off in Venom Volume 1, issue 15 in 2012, after Eddie Brock began to hunt down symbiotes. Brock trapped her by paralyzing her with a sonic emitter and then stabbed her multiple times times in the head with a heated dagger. I mean, forget symbiotes, Eddie Brock should be at the top of this list. Dude gets gruesome at times. Anywho, Scream's host Donna had a history of psychotic episodes prior to her becoming one of the Life Foundation's hosts. After bonding with Scream, she attacked them all in California and was initially defeated by Venom and Spider-Man thanks to a metabolic accelerator. The Life Foundation managed to recover her and her siblings though, and later she returned, killing the hosts of the other symbiotes with a powerful psychic ability, thanks to Donna's schizophrenia apparently, and then framed Eddie Brock for all of their murders, which pissed off her symbiote siblings quite a bit. Needless to say, she's slightly unhinged. Up next at number 4, President Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn of Earth 138, or rather Ozzy Osborn as is his nickname, is one sick motherfucker. Ozzy was the leader of a political regime in the US and used his company Oscorp to develop something called Venom, the Variable Engagement Neurosensitive Organic Mesh. In other words, he used the Venom symbiote to make America great again, which is something that he literally says in the comic. His plan is to clean up the country with all of his goons using the Venom modified symbiote to help perpetuate his fascist master plan. But luckily, the punk rock Spider-Man in this reality weakens them by using an electric guitar. While the character on his own may not be the most powerful fella on the block, although we assure you he can throw his weight around, what makes him so powerful is his legion of followers committed to his ideologies, which is pretty terrifying, to say the least. And at number 3, Anti-Venom. Anti-Venom first debuted in the 2008 story arc New Ways to Die in the Amazing Spider-Man 569. Now at the time, Eddie Brock was not bonded with Venom. He had cancer, and he got a job at a soup kitchen. His boss, a man named Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative, had a healing touch, which then cured Brock of his cancer. So when Venom came along and tried to rebond with him, Brock's skin became caustic to Venom, causing him to be enveloped in a new white symbiote created from the remnants of Venom, which then merged with his white blood cells that were charged thanks to Mr. Negative. Anti-Venom's got a slew of standout abilities. When Brock was the host, he was immune to fire, heat, and sound-based attacks. Anti-Venom also has a neat little nifty healing ability. He produces antibodies that can cure things like diseases, radioactivity, parasites, and the effects of drugs. Whenever he's around Spider-Man, he cancels out Spidey's powers. Now that being said, Anti-Venom does come with his own unique weaknesses too. Concentrations of Norman Osborn's super venom via Freak's DNA makes it incredibly vulnerable. And if touched by Mr. Negative, his healing abilities can become void. Brock would later sacrifice the symbiote to cure people from the Spider Island virus though.
Number 2, Red Goblin. Okay, so Green Goblin plus Carnage equals holy shit. Appearing in the Amazing Spider-Man 798, Norman Osborn steals the Carnage symbiote, and after that, well, all hell breaks loose. So thankfully Peter Parker injected the serum into the Green Goblin, infused with nanites, just to help him, chill out. No more powers, no more crazy stuff. Shh, quiet time, that's it. Norman used the Carnage symbiote to eject all the nanites, but then that ended up creating this monster mash becoming, you guessed it, the Red Goblin. The rare weaknesses that the symbiote does have went away once the two merged. That's right, if you think you can use sound or fire to level this guy, think again. Green Goblin was fine with those things, so now the Carnage symbiote isn't even worried about it. Even the bombs that he throws are like these Carnage bombs that can bite you. They're all fused together. It's terrifying. Terrifying.
Number 1. Andy Benton as Scream. Scream is by no means a new symbiote, but her partnership with Andy Benton is. Andy Benton was a student at West Philadelphia High School, which eventually led to her becoming partnered with the symbiote Mania. During the events of Absolute Carnage, Carnage sent a horde of symbiote doppelgangers to kill her, as well as Patricia Robertson, who was currently taken over by the Scream symbiote. After Carnage impaled Andy on a meat hook in a processing warehouse, Scream attempted to rescue her, but was fatally injured. Abandoning Patricia's corpse, the Scream symbiote bonded with Andy, making her the new Scream. Andy has a somewhat tragic relationship with Scream, finding herself depressed and resenting sharing a headspace with the Scream symbiote. And I won't spoil, but so far, things have not ended well.
Number 10, Spiderling. Also known as Anna Mae Parker, she first appeared in 2015 in Spider-Man's Renew Your Vows storyline as part of the Secret Wars event. She is the daughter of Peter Parker and Mary Jane. When the multiverse is destroyed by incursions and recreated as Battleworld, she finds herself living in a domain known as the Regency. This place is dominated by Regent, an evil mastermind on a mission to eliminate all superheroes and steal their powers. Growing up, she develops spider powers of her own, causing her parents to fear that she will one day be hunted. She actually is hunted down later and kidnapped by Venom, who recently escaped from prison. The epic confrontation that follows ends with Spider-Man bringing a burning building crashing down on Venom, presumably killing him. Ooh, Daddy Spider-Man is protective. Later in life, Anna confronts the villain Mole Man on her own while her parents are busy arguing about their daughter being a superhero. The Parker trio goes on to defeat the villain together, and Peter names her Spiderling. She has the same sense of responsibility as Peter, but with Mary Jane's headstrong attitude. Number 9. Spider-Girl. First appearing in one of Marvel's What If storylines, number 7, in 1978, Betty Brant was a newly hired employee at the Daily Bugle. Attending a scientific demonstration with her colleagues, she winds up in the same lab Peter Parker is visiting with his classmates. A radioactive spider drops down and lands on Betty's hand, resulting in her being bit instead of Peter. Concerned for Betty, Peter convinces Jameson to let her take the day off, and he invites her out to dinner. Later, the two of them discover Betty has developed spider powers, and Pete inspires her to take up crime fighting so he can take some pictures and sell them to the Bugle. Jameson, of course, only uses the photos to start a smear campaign about Spider-Girl being a menace. The two later fail to stop a burglar, who goes on to kill Peter's Uncle Ben. Betty is horrified by this and resolves to abandon her identity as Spider-Girl. Hey guys, before I get on to the next one, please take a second to hit that like button. It really helps us out here at Top 10 Nerd. Number 8. Penny Parker. You might recognize her from the Spider-Verse film, but Penny actually made her debut in 2014 in Marvel's Edge of the Spider-Verse number 5. When she was 9 years old, her father died, the original pilot of the 900-pound spider suit. She learns from her Uncle Ben and Aunt May that she's the only one who can take his place, and allows herself to be bitten by the radioactive spider that powers half of the suit's CPU. 5 years later, Mysterio begins infecting the people of New York with a hallucinogenic gas, and it's Penny who shows up and dispatches him, later working alongside Daredevil. She also later joins the Spider Army, recruited by Peter Porker and Old Man Spider on a subway ride home. Penny is Japanese and a vegetarian. Her superpowered suit pays homage to classic mecha anime, and some of her classmates' names are actually references to popular shows. Number 7. Spider-Woman. First appearing in Marvel's Spotlight number 32 in 1977, Jessica Drew grew up in a small cottage with her father, Jonathan Drew. John found uranium in large amounts on the property and went on to build a research facility, performing controversial studies in genetics and cell regeneration. Eventually, little Jessica becomes poisoned from the constant uranium exposure, and John injects her with an untested serum made with the blood of several uncommon species of spiders, and you'll never guess what kind of powers she gets. He seals her in a genetic accelerator while she undergoes a transformation, and she stays in stasis for decades, her aging greatly slowed. Now, as a fully grown woman with hardly any life experience, she wastes no time getting into trouble. Her first romance ends in tragedy when she accidentally kills her boyfriend, and later is manipulated by Mentalo into joining Hydra. Hoping to mold her into an assassin, sends her off to assassinate Nick Fury. She refuses and fights back against her masters, eventually escaping and starting a new life as a friendly neighborhood bounty hunter, Spider-Woman. She later finds herself dubbed the Dark Angel of San Francisco, swinging around the city and solving crimes just like the real Spidey. Number 6. Spider-Gwen. Raised by George Stacy alone after her mother died, her free spirit and creativity often clashed with her father's rigid attitude. She became friends with Peter Parker and formed a band with her classmates known as the Mary Janes. After being bitten by a genetically engineered spider, she gained spider powers and became known as Spider-Woman. Peter Parker, desperate to be like his idol Spider-Woman, conducts an experiment on himself that turns him into a monstrous lizard-like beast, and Gwen winds up beating the snot out of him, resulting in his death. This leaves her branded a criminal by the city, and the guilt of Peter's death hangs heavy over her head. She doubles her efforts to fight crime, eventually having her identity uncovered by her father. At one point, she travels to another universe and meets a version of Peter Parker that became the Goblin, overwhelmed by rage at not being able to save his universe's version of Gwen Stacy. She attempts to recruit him into the Spider Army, but he refuses. Later, when she reveals that she's actually an alternate Gwen Stacy, he sacrifices himself to save her like he wishes he could have in his own dimension. Number 5. Silk. First appearing in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3 in 2014, Cindy Moon was born with an eidetic memory. At a scientific demonstration, the radioactive spider that gave Peter Parker his powers also bit her in the ankle. The first use of her powers was actually when she got home and accidentally webbed up her parents. She is then taken away by Ezekiel Sims, who locks her away to protect her from Morlun, the devourer of totems. He's on an interdimensional mission to basically kill every single version of Spider-Man. Good luck, am I right? So yeah, she's locked away in this tower with a whole bunch of books and tapes and stuff, and she stays there willingly to keep herself safe. Spider-Man finds out about this at some point, and he comes along to rescue her. She improvises a sweet costume made of webs, and the two immediately begin an intimate relationship. You can only imagine what a mess that would make. They make a pretty good team though, and later go up against Electro together. She once even saved Spider-Man from being unmasked by the Black Cat on live television. Number 4. May Parker. May is the daughter of Mary Jane and Peter in a future alternate universe. She first appeared in What If Volume 2, number 105. When Peter Parker loses a leg in an intense battle against Green Goblin, Spidey decides to focus more on being a father and decides to keep his past from his daughter. Unfortunately, she develops her own spider powers similar to his at the age of 15. She has a few adventures of her own before her parents discover her dual identity, but Pete and Mary Jane are supportive of her crime-fighting passion. She later goes on to help S.H.I.E.L.D. battle against Carnage, and once encounters a clone of herself. She later assists the Web Warriors and the Superior Spider Army. Number 3. Spider Bitch. First appearing in Wolverine Volume 3, number 67 in 2008, she is technically Peter Parker's granddaughter, with her parents being Hawkeye and Tanya Parker. She's super badass, and I love her costume. She is from a future alternate reality where Kingpin rules over Hammer Falls, a future version of Las Vegas. She gathers up a team of heroes and attempts to take control of the area, but ends up being captured by Kingpin and set to be executed. Her father, Hawkeye, helps her to break free and is shocked when she ends up killing Kingpin in her rage and then attempts to kill Papa Hawkeye as well. She eventually embraces her legacy and becomes Spider-Girl, later recruited by Superior Spider-Man into the Spider Army. She ultimately survives in the end and returns to her home dimension. Number 2. Lady Spider. Appearing in Spider-Verse number 1 in 2014, May Riley's father kept numerous animals in his study, including a spider. One day, May opened up the cage, believing the spider to be upset about being held captive, and she got bit. It was actually just a normal spider. Later on in life, her father dies and she builds a super suit with mechanical arms and mechanical web shooters, becoming the Lady Spider. She has 3 university degrees and is the only female student in her field. She first used her suit to rescue the mayor from Electro, and when the 6 men of the Sinistry arrive, led by Green Goblin, she holds them off, forcing them to retreat. And now number 1. Spider-Man. In Marvel's What If number 23, released in 1980, we meet the amazing Spider-Man, also known as Aunt May. When her nephew Peter Parker forgets his lunch at home, a concerned May Parker rushes off to a science demonstration to make sure he gets it. He's a growing boy. There, she is bitten by a radioactive spider, which gave her spider powers. I'm serious. May first uses her power to earn some money for her family doing stunts, but later defeats the villain Leapfrog and becomes a real crime fighter. When the Master Weaver Karn shows up in her universe on his relentless hunt to kill anyone who possesses spider powers, she heroically surrenders herself to save her family. Also known as Spider Lady, or sometimes just Granny, May is later recruited into the Spider Army during the Spider-Geddon event, to battle against the Inheritors on the Marvel Prime universe. In the end, the evil Inheritors are defeated by transferring their consciousness into infant human babies, which May actually adopts and takes back to her universe. Truly your friendly neighborhood aunt.
Starting us off at number 10, Venom. I sometimes feel a little bit bad about these symbiote lists. Venom, who's sort of the poster boy for the Clintar race, often ends up in the early numbers in our list. I mean, yeah, he's powerful, but compared to his offspring, thanks to the genetic rules of his race, he is the strongest Clintar on the block. And in terms of being the scariest, well, despite making one hell of an impression when he first hit the scene, beyond just being an alien costume, back in April of 1988 in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 299 and 300, he was utterly terrifying. These days, as an anti-hero, the character is arguably one of the more scarier looking superheroes of the Marvel Universe. But Venom and artist Todd McFarlane are largely to thank for the horrific aesthetic of the other Clintar characters, and all of the characters coming up on our list. The symbiotes have become utterly iconic and unmistakable in terms of appearance, and that's a legacy that continues to persevere in comics to this day. life. Up next, number 9, Mania/Maniac. The Mania symbiote first appeared in Venom Volume 1, Issue 1 in 2003. It was cloned from a piece of venom that was obtained by the Ararat Corporation, with the goal of using it to exterminate all life on Earth. Mania was a bit of a weirdo. It refused to bond with hosts, and instead would just brutally murder them, just for the fun of it. At one point, it bonded with a prison inmate named Eric Moody, and then jumped ship to an elderly mental patient named Alphonse Poigna. Moody managed to fight off Mania, but only for it to bond with Alphonse and then mock Moody about getting raped in prison after seeing his memories of the event. And then Mania raped and murdered Moody. So yeah, not the kindest symbiote on the block, clearly. It would later become Maniac, bonding with Lee Price, who had previously bonded with Venom. Price renamed Mania as Maniac after Price had ambushed the original host and badly injured her with the sonic cannon and flamethrowers, taking the symbiote for himself. Apparently Price is permanently bonded with Mania, using his immense willpower to remain bonded to the symbiote at all times.
Number 8. Hulk Venom. After a disagreement with Venom about the way to proceed in dealing with an even stronger Carnage, Venom leaves Eddie Brock to find someone strong enough to work with him, and he finds Bruce Banner. Venom immediately takes a new form, a combination of Venom and Hulk, that I'll call Venom Hulk. Venom Hulk proves more than a match for Carnage, but after entering the Venom Hulk's mind and depowering it to Bruce Banner, Carnage manages to absorb Venom, enhancing his power to an even greater degree. Alas, Hulk Venom was to be short-lived.
Up next at 7, Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider is, you guessed it, a Venomized Ghost Rider. Hailing from Earth TRN 647 and first appearing in Edge of Venomverse issue 3 in 2017, this Ghost Rider is Roberto Reyes, the version of the character who was possessed by his uncle's demonic spirit. When the symbiote bonded with him, it affected the control that he had learned to maintain over his uncle's spirit, which caused an imbalance, and Roberto, his uncle, and the symbiote all fought over who had control over Roberto's body. Eventually, the spirit and the symbiote won over Reyes, calling themselves Ghost Rider in mockery of him. Ghost Rider has some pretty sweet abilities thanks to his Venom symbiote. The character can manifest a symbiotically augmented version of the Hell Charger directly from his body, which has a fanged mouth that operates as a grill, but can also devour Ghost Rider's victims. He also forms chains out of symbiote biomass, which is pretty neat. But like most on this list, he has an untimely end. The character dies in Venomverse issue 3 during the Poison Clintar War. Up next at 6, the Venomsaurus Rex. What happens when a T-Rex bonds with a Clintar? This big fella. That's what. While some of you might be like, dinosaurs are cool. Consider how utterly horrific it would be to come face to face with not only a real-life dinosaur, but one with the bloodlust of a Clintar symbiote. Real-life dinosaur? Okay, sure, count me on board. But one that wants to eat my brains for sustenance? Yeah, might pass on that. There's not a whole lot to say about the Venomsaurus Rex, aside from the fact that it is a symbiote who bonded with a savage T-Rex, and it has made a handful of appearances in the Marvel Universe over the years, including in the Venomverse and in Old Man Logan. Up next, number 5, Carnage. Carnage has never been one to hold back, but that's also what makes him a bit vulnerable. He's kind of loose cannon at times, like a speeding train of violent chaos. Loose cannon, kinda vulnerable. Carnage first appeared in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 360 back in 1992. He was created with the intention of being a much darker version of Venom, a total psychopath who had no sense of morality. His host Cletus Cassidy was modeled after DC's Joker, and the character is often depicted as Venom's archenemy. So how did he come to be fiction-wise? Well, he's Venom's offspring. When Venom reattached to Eddie Brock in prison, Venom left its offspring inside the cell. Clintar have no emotional attachment to their offspring, so Venom didn't bother informing Eddie about it, thinking it was of no importance. That symbiote offspring then bonded with Cassidy, and Carnage was born, with their bond being even stronger than Brock's and Venom's. Carnage broke out of prison and started murdering left, right, and center, leaving the word Carnage at the scene of each of the crimes, written in blood, as one does.
Number 4, Null, the god of the symbiotes. For real. So back it up way before life and creation, before time and the universe itself. I'm talking way back. Ancient malevolent deities awaited. Once the universe became a thing, Null, the god of darkness, wasn't a fan of the company, and he set out to destroy the Celestials and went to war. So after forging this weapon called the All-Black, which is a sword of living darkness, cool, and a Celestial's head, even cooler, after getting his ass handed to him, he figured out a new plan. He realized he can create symbiotes. What is he doing? Also, sir, can I have one, please? Thank you. So he actually manifested himself a symbiotic suit. Must be nice. And then went after all the gods. Bully. Speaking of bully, Null actually went after the Silver Surfer in Silver Surfer Black. Side note, can we get a Silver Surfer movie like yesterday, please? He eventually arrived on Earth taking on the form of a dragon. Cool entry. Number 3, Endosim Armor. This symbiote armor was created by Tony Stark, model number 50 to be exact. Making its first appearance in Superior Iron Man Volume 1, the Endosim Armor is a liquid smart metal that forms around the host's body. It was actually inspired by symbiotes. So he uses the suit to fight you. It wraps around you, but you can't control it or host it. Ah, what a tease. The stuff is so strong though, it even held up against Storm, so pretty hard not to throw this one in the mix.
In at number 2, Null. Null may not look as scary as any of our previous numbers on this list initially, but it's more so his capabilities that make him utterly terrifying. Null is often considered as the symbiote god. He's the deity that created the Clintars, an origin that was crafted in that 2018 Venom run. And long story short, Null's existence predates that of the universes. Back when the Celestials had created the universe, Null had some serious beef with them, and fought against them with a living sword called the All Black, that was created from his shadow. He chopped off one of their heads and was cast back into the void by the other Celestials in retaliation. But Null used that severed Celestial head to forge a symbiote sword and symbiote armor, right from the eldritch darkness that he commanded, and set out on a mission to kill all of the other gods. When coming out of the void, he landed on a desolate planet, and created an army of symbiotes, who would later rebel against him. They imprisoned him in the core of their planet, which they would call Clintar, which is their word for cage. So if that isn't enough to vouch for why this dude is scary, I mean, he's a literal god, who has divine physiology, is self-sustaining. He's immortal and has lived for over 13.7 billion years, he can shapeshift, create life, and also wants to commit mass genocide. So yeah, not an overly pleasant being to encounter. And finally, in at number 1, Null. Null is not only the newest symbiote to debut in the Marvel Universe on this list, but also the most powerful, all thanks to who it's bonded with. He's the god of symbiotes. So before we get into this number any further, heads up, this does contain spoilers for the recent Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman Venom run, so you've been warned. Alright, so in this Venom run, we're getting a bit of a retelling about the history of the Clintars. The first issue revealed that something called the god of the symbiotes had awoken, and it kinda looked like a giant dragon when it first appeared. Essentially, his backstory is that Null was a god who retaliated against the Celestials when they created the universe, and created a living sword from his own shadow, then used the Celestial's severed head to forge his symbiote sword in its cosmic energies, along with creating a symbiotic suit of armor from the eldritch darkness that he commanded. Essentially, he had manifested the first symbiote out of his shadow, so he could kill a Celestial. Null's range of abilities are pretty vast. He has something called Unbrachonesis, which essentially gives him the ability to create, control, and manipulate a fount of eldritch darkness, which is a manifestation of the primordial void that existed before the universe, also known as the Living Abyss. So yeah, overall, pretty intense stuff. Now he can dominate symbiotes, being the divine progenitor of the symbiotes and the nexus of their hive mind. Now that means he can take control of Venom and essentially revert him to more primitive and aggressive behavior. Null is immortal. He has lived for at least 13.7 billion years, is self-sustaining, has a regenerative healing factor, and all of the strength and durability that you can imagine. His one weakness though is divine electricity. He's vulnerable to it, so individuals like Thor can really f him up real good, temporarily destabilizing him.